Collaboration and co-creative media making in precarious times. From matters of fact to matters of concern and matters of care. Interactive media, networking, co-creativity, mobile media making, and climate action. In this combination, the terms networking, creation, and mobilization can take various meanings and thus set free creative potential. This contribution aims at fathoming the potential of networking mobile media practices in the context of collaborative climate action and care. Taking Felix Guattari's ecosophical thought of three interdependent ecologies and their prolongation in the currently emerging environmental humanities with recent discourses in documentary and digital theory as the framework, the objective of this contribution is to discuss approaches in emerging media making and to deduce strategies how to make things matter. Within this bigger context, the theoretical argument is based on key concepts in co-creation, as well as aspects of creative use of mobile media, interactive network devices to craft media assemblages in which often processes are more important than artifacts, and within which the participant or user creators are aware of being themselves entangled in multifaceted biological, psychological, physical, social, and cultural contexts. The nucleus hereby resides in the intertwining of emplaced interaction in hyperlocal contexts, the idea of focused perception and perspective taking, and foremost, the potential of networked media. The hypothesis therefore runs that due to the specific affordances, especially co-creative media practices can contribute to a shift from mere matters of fact in climate communication to matters of concern, and ultimately, hopefully, matters of care. The idea is to mobilize co-creative participants not only to witness climate change and document the most often invisible shifts in their surroundings, but rather to invite them to engage in local and at the same time global interventions, and thus to rediscover collective responsibilities and communal agency in this situation. Through the lens of these features, different strategies of how to mobilize user participants will be discussed, focusing on different venues to encourage an empathetic idea of local as well as global consciousness, care, and emotional engagement, an approach which goes beyond top-down communication of scientific facts, but which encourages creative communal action-taking. As paradigmatic projects, we will examine the Disaster Resilience Journal and I See Change. It will be discussed how interdependent entanglements of agents in these two projects aim at catalyzing meaningful place-based environmental engagement. However, before entering in these entanglements, let me start from the beginning, or rather with some rather theoretical abstract considerations. Starting from philosophical reflections might be counterintuitive if one is confronting a global climate emergency. And nonetheless, I would like to invite you to do so. In one of his seminal writings, Considering Complexity, The Three Ecologies, Guattari suggests that life is constituted by three distinguishable but corresponding ecologies: the environmental, the social, and the mental. The first two, the environmental and the social, may be fairly straightforward. The first refers to the material world, or what is usually understood by natural environment, or the observable. The second, the social, comprises the realm of intersubjectivity, the cultural and the world inhabited by us as experiencing subjects in interaction with others. The third ecology is less easily accessible than the first two ones. Following Iverkin in his reading of Guattari, it can be described as an intermediary register between the first two. The idea of a mental ecology is intended to suggest that we, humans, are embodied agents and interpreters of a world that is not only there to be perceived, but also perceptive and communicative in its nature. Perception or mind, understood as sense and world-making capacity, intrinsic to all experience, is the interactive dimension through which a world comes into world-bearing beings. Foremost, however, we are revisiting a problem which Alfred North Whitehead calls the bifurcation of nature, which means the separation or split between feelings, meaning-making, sensing, and so on the one side, and hardcore facts on the other side. Yet, in contrast to this vital call to overcome splits, we are rather facing disturbances in one of the spheres. Humanity seems to have lost its head, or more precisely, its head is no longer functioning with its body. How can it find a compass by which to reorientate itself within a modernity whose complexity overwhelms it? In remaking social practices, Guattari thus advocates for the invention of new collective assemblages of enunciation, to reconnect the head to the body, to join science and technology with human value. Without a change in mentalities, without entry into a post-media era, there can be no enduring hold over the environment. Yet, without modifications to the social and material environment, there can be no change in mentalities. This finally leads him to postulate the necessity of founding an ecosophy that would link environmental ecology to social ecology and to mental ecology, a paradigm which, in the following, I would like to relate to reflections on mobile media making and mobilization. As Camille Baker, Max Schleser, and Kasia Mologa point out, there are mainly 4 key aspects in the creative use of mobile media phone. Its innate performativity or movement, gestural qualities of the device, its portability factor, viewing the world through the camera, and intimacy. In the view of the specific focus of this paper, one may highlight 2 aspects of this approach to mobile media, namely the performative mobility and the coupling of visualities and expressivity, and in a further step, enrich them with some thoughts about emplaced interaction, emplaced visualities, and networked media. First of all, mobile media also afford emplaced interaction. This concept, developed by Judith Aston, builds on Paul Durish's concept of embodied interaction, but additionally brings into it the idea of co-creation. Creation, manipulation, and sharing of meaning through engaged interaction, bringing our bodies and minds into directly interplay with the wider environment, are at the center of the reflection. Though these considerations seem to be rather theoretical, hypothetical, and far away from rather concrete questions at stake when thinking about mediating in times of climate catastrophe, they nonetheless relate to actual practices of mobile media making. This will become clearer when we complete the conceptual mosaic with 3 further elements: the cluster of emplaced visuality and sociality, the notion of the more than representational, which we can also put the focus on the procedural nature of projects, and the complex of networking co-creation. Bringing this all back to actual practices of mobile media making, one may recall the fact that when speaking of mobile media, we do not only understand portable media. Rather, mobile media are most often also network media. This capacity affords networking, sharing and going public. And given the opportunities of social media, mobile media makers can reach out. They can connect locally, but also globally, or combining both, the sense of place within the sense of global space and accountability, or hyperlocality, as Zizek puts it, can be seen in the projects that, in the following, I would like to examine. The Disaster Resilience Journal. Launched in 2014, and unfortunately no longer online, the Disaster Resilience Journal opens short glimpses into a world of early warning systems around the globe. The posts in the journal came from all over the world, from Haiti to the Solomon Islands, from Croatia to Peru, telling stories from the struggle for clean water, the fight to protect the mangroves, the maintenance of terraces, the solidarity in times of upheaval, and most importantly, the encounter, not clash, of technologies and old traditions. Each of the 42 online serialized contributions, which were realized on a daily basis via social media network, focuses on the one theme or dealt with one key question, such as, what kind of crisis are we currently facing? On a very local scale, deeply emplaced, but which cannot be thought of in isolation from global issues. Or what can resilience look like? And what does it take to be resilient or become more resilient, not only as individuals, but as common humanity? Any of the posts, ranging from smartphone photography, short video essays and interviews, and very intimate personal accounts, to animated sequences, gamified interventions, but also live events, aimed to make user interactors rethink their assumptions and values, their sense of place and space, and reconsider the notion of accountability and responsibility for communal, social, and individual mental change in times of climate crisis and social, economic, and cultural shifts. Thereby, the project tried to shatter our solidified patterns of thought. Thereby, the project tried to shatter our solidified patterns of thought and to set them into motion, and consequently revitalize a feeling of accountability, even for the crises which seem to be far away, and making us realize our own agency. Far from aiming to serve as a remedy for all the complex issues at stake here, encompassing all three ecologies, mental, social, and natural, the Disaster Resilience Journal had set itself the mission not only to provide first-hand impressions, but to help us reorientate ourselves. It invited us as user interactors to see past our own personal horizon and realize what happens in Peru or Nepal or Croatia. It is as important as to those that live outside than when within. Fostering local, individual, and communal resilience and contributing to the formation of a global feeling of accountability and agency via network mobile media practices, this rather early example of collaborative, hyperlocal mobile media storytelling with a focus on environmental issues can be seen as a manifestation of what Guattari probably had in mind when calling for the invention of new collective assemblages of enunciation. I see change. The second project I would like to shortly introduce is I see change. I see change is based on logics similar to those used at the Disaster Resilience Journal. Still, it puts an even greater focus on connecting local and global community building within a scientific impetus and at the same time a sense of accountability and empowerment. In the abouts of the website, the initiators make a clear statement. The leading idea of I See Change lies in connecting people to their changing environments and developing solutions together. At the core of this project stands connectivity and co-creativity in the sense of co-creative witnessing and documentation, and even more so in form of the co-creative exploration of ways how to deal with urgent issues and develop a global community of accountability and agency. At the same time, beyond social connectivity between human agents, also a connection to the more than human world is promoted. Keywords in this project mission statement, or rather manifesto, are therefore connectivity and collaboration, as well as change and the interconnection between all living forms. In this sense, I See Change aims to offer a community a way to build and celebrate relationships with nature, our cities, the people who study and manage them, and even with one another. Visitors interested in the site are invited to become I See Change community members. Additionally, participants get introduced how to document as an emplaced citizen science the immediate changes visible to their environments. Among others, advice is given how to best shoot pictures with their phones and which aspects are relevant. The best posts combine detailed stories and photos to show what you are seeing in the environment and how it affects you, the instructions say. Emplacement comes into play in at least two dimensions. As emplaced experts in situ, participants are mobilized in times of, for example, extreme weather events, to actively contribute to the creation of a larger corpus of material and to collect local data. And secondly, with a focus on emplaced interaction, one can witness the emergence of feeling of agencies and resilience, which in combination with the problem-solving part is vital. Catalyzed through the co-creative interventions, I See Change does not leave the participants in neither apocalyptic panic, nor paralyzing apathy, or passive-depressive resignation. Rather, addressing concerns situated in all three of Guattari's ecologies, the project bears the potential to inform, to connect, to empower, to activate, and to mobilize. If one takes the impetus of I See Change and draws parallels to the potential of mobile media with their specific affordances, it becomes obvious why the use of smart mobile devices is so promising in this project. Not only are the portability factor and the innate performativity and the gestural qualities of the device ideal to document change in our natural environment, also the expressivity of the device and the predilection for close-ups are predestined for documenting and pointing out the small changes which, without a focused attention, might pass unnoticed. Still, one of the most prominent features in this assemblage is, once again, the interweaving of the factors of emplacement and hyperlocal networking. At this point, it's time to zoom out again to see the bigger picture, which takes form when relating the theoretical considerations from which we set out to the various findings which emerged from the analysis of paradigmatic projects. While in the Disaster Resilience Journal, emplaced digital storytelling and the creation of a pluriperspective hyperlocal narrative for a common humanity prevail, and a network of stories unfold, I See Change shifts the focus from a merely anthropocentric to a more holistic picture of the current state of the planet, trying to mobilize participants as citizen science, to observe, to witness change, to engage in public scientific discourses, as well as communally take measures in situ. The overall aim is to induce change through knowledge, not so much, but even more so through awareness. Seen through this lens, mobile media practices do not only combine aesthetic practices with connectivity in a communicative, anthropocentric sense. Rather, through meaning, place-based environmental engagement and witnessing, through co-creative, community-based citizen science-driven engagement and concrete action taking, they have the potential to stimulate experiences that go beyond cognitive understanding. Building on Latour, who, rejecting all too narrow notions of scientific claims that when agencies are introduced, they are never presented simply as matters of fact, but always as matters of concern, with their modes of fabrication and their stabilizing mechanisms clearly visible, Bella Casa goes one step further. For her, the next and literally vital step consists in moving on to matters of care. Care is to be more easily turned into a verb, to care. One can make oneself concerned, but to care contains a notion of doing that concerns lack. In this vision, to care joins together an affective state, a material vital doing, and an ethico-political obligation. Taken together, all these aspects, which are manifested in the projects analyzed, we have finally come full circle. As seen, interactive mobile media practices have the potential to mobilize and hence to realize a new version of Guattari's ethico-aesthetic paradigm, not at least due to the manifold dimensions of mobility and mobilization, connectivity and co-creativity, dynamic emplacement and procedurality, which are deeply interwoven in doings as matters of care. And even if these practices might seem exiguous in light of overwhelming dimensions of crisis we are currently facing, they might nonetheless be the nucleus for further engagement, in which, to end with a philosophical, poetic vision of Guattari, mentalities and social practices would give back to humanity, if it ever had, a sense of responsibility, not only for its own survival, but equally for the future of all life on the planet, for animal and vegetable species.